What if your business became successful only after the dead started visiting? A man in Singapore opens a parking lot on a forgotten piece of land. At first, no one shows up. But then come the strange noises, the lights, the handprints, and a boy asking, "Why did you let them hurt my mummy?" This isn't a horror story, it's something else. Let's explore this story with Uncle Hullo and X. Kenneth never planned to run a parking lot, especially not one tucked behind a row of aging buildings, down a narrow lane that most people missed unless they were truly lost. But when his father offered to lease the vacant lot, an oddly shaped patch of land that no one had touched in years, Kenneth saw a chance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something of his own. After leaving his last job at a car rental company, he wanted to build something simple, sustainable. The first time he unlocked the rusted gate, dust clouded up around his shoes. Weeds pushed through cracked cement. A faded sign, still hanging lopsided on the fence, read, "Private property, no dumping." There were no streetlights, no shade, no clear parking lines. Just gravel, silence, and the distant hum of city traffic. But Kenneth believed in it. He swept the lot clean, marked parking bays with cones, installed a motion sensor light, and bought a second-hand folding cot to rest on during his long shifts. At night, he stayed under a canvas canopy with a battery fan, listening to music and imagining what the space could become. He printed flyers, created a Google listing, even convinced his father to park there every morning to make it look active. For a while, it felt like the start of something. But as days passed and customers didn't show up, that optimism slowly gave way to frustration, then fatigue, then something else he couldn't name. And just as Kenneth began to question whether he had made a terrible mistake, small things started happening. Things he couldn't explain. Things that made him wonder if he was truly alone in that lot at night. Quick pause before the chills continue. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe, because once we reach 1,000 subs, I'll unlock a brand new schedule, multiple ghost stories, every day. You don't want to miss it. By the second week, Kenneth was questioning everything. He had mapped out a simple business plan, undercut nearby parking rates by 10%, offered day-long flat fees, and advertised on local forums. He even struck up deals with a couple of nearby cafes for cross-promotions. But the reality on the ground? Brutal. No one wanted to park there. Despite being just minutes from a busy commercial area, the lot remained empty. Most drivers preferred multi-story car parks with shade and security cameras. Kenneth's open-air lot, with its DIY signage and single motion light, felt like a temporary setup, disposable. Some days he didn't see a single customer. He started bringing books, then a portable radio, then puzzles, anything to kill the hours. He'd lie on the folding cot beneath the canopy, one arm over his eyes, wondering what he'd tell his dad if this didn't work out. His father, Mr. Lim, had been supportive but cautious from the beginning. He still came by in the mornings, parked his car in the same corner bay, and brought Kenneth Kopi in plastic bags tied with raffia string. If nothing else, at least you're learning resilience. Kenneth tried to laugh, but inside he felt pressure building. There were overheads, small but constant. Rent, electricity for the fan and lights, replacement cones when careless drivers crushed them. He logged every cent in a worn notebook. It made the silence of the lot feel louder. Then there were the nights. Kenneth had decided to sleep at the lot a few times a week, hoping it would deter vandals and maybe attract night shift workers. He set up a camping cot under the canopy,
pulled mosquito netting around it, and powered a small fan using a car battery. The first few nights were uneventful. The sound of distant traffic was oddly comforting, and the sky above, though polluted, still showed a few stars. But soon, strange little things began happening. One morning he woke up to find all the cones had been shifted inward, tightened unnaturally close to each other. Another night, the laminated parking sign had been peeled off the fence, left folded in half near the gate. He thought it might have been wind, or maybe pranksters, but nothing ever showed up on the motion light. He started noticing drag marks in the gravel, like something had been dragged in a slow arc across the lot. No tire tracks, no footprints. Still, he chalked it up to boredom, overthinking, his mind playing tricks, until one night something happened that he couldn't explain away. He had just turned off the fan and laid down when he heard it. A click. The sound of a car door unlocking. Kenneth sat up, heart pounding. There were no cars in the lot. His father had left hours ago, and no one else had parked that day. He scanned the space. Nothing moved. He waited, breath held, for another sound. Nothing. The next morning, he found a plastic toy, a tiny red car, the kind sold in supermarkets, sitting dead center in bay number 3. It hadn't been there the night before. Kenneth stared at it for a long time before picking it up. It was warm.
After the toy car incident, Kenneth started paying closer attention, not out of fear, yet, but out of a growing sense that something wasn't quite right. The disturbances were small, subtle, but too consistent to be random. First, it was the sound of footsteps, barefoot, light, like a child running across the gravel. He'd hear them around 3 a.m., always at the same time, always behind the canopy, where visibility was worst. Whenever he got up to check, there was nothing, no movement, just silence thick enough to choke on. Then came the smells. One night he caught a whiff of something sweet, old jasmine, floral, thick, the kind used in traditional offerings. It lingered for only a few seconds before being replaced by a metallic scent, like rusted iron and something faintly coppery. Blood, maybe. Kenneth tried brushing it off. Maybe it was the wind or something wafting in from nearby dumpsters. But when he woke up the next morning, there was a trail of dried petals from the gate to the center of the lot. No wind could have arranged them like that. It was getting harder to rationalize. Customers, few as they were, started noticing too. A delivery driver mentioned strange interference on his radio when barked. Static, then voices, he muttered, lighting a cigarette. Sounded like someone humming in the back seat, but the car was locked. Another woman, an office worker, asked if Kenneth had installed motion sensors, because the lights blinked while I was reversing, in a pattern, almost like Morse code. Kenneth didn't know what to say. He started keeping a logbook, not for accounting anymore, but for the incidents. Every time something strange occurred, he wrote it down, along with the time, weather, and whether he was alone. One night, the motion sensor light began blinking at random, not once, but in exact 5-second intervals. Kenneth watched it go on, off, for 10 straight minutes. When he approached the sensor, it stopped immediately. Later, he reviewed the area with a flashlight and found something chilling. A tiny handprint on the car bonnet, parked closest to the light. Small, smudged, oily. Too small for an adult, too clear to ignore. And then there was the folding chair. He kept one under the canopy for reading, but one morning it was no longer there. He searched the lot, the surrounding alley, even the trash pile. Gone. 3 nights later, it returned, placed upright in the exact center of the lot. Clean, untouched,
facing the gate. That was the moment Kenneth stopped trying to explain, because whatever was happening, it wasn't random. It was watching him. And worse, it might have been waiting for something.
It started with a car alarm. Kenneth was dozing on the folding cot under his canopy when the sharp wail shattered the stillness. He jolted upright, heart racing. The sound was coming from the far end of the lot, a silver sedan that had pulled in earlier that evening. It belonged to a new customer who'd said she'd be gone for just an hour. He rushed over. The alarm was shrieking, lights flashing violently, but no one was near the vehicle. He circled it twice, looking for signs of a break-in or damage. Nothing. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the alarm stopped. Silence returned. The air felt heavier now. Kenneth glanced at the windshield. A single handprint, small, faint, and smeared slightly, was pressed against the glass from the inside. The print hadn't been there earlier. He was sure of it. He reached out to wipe it away, but hesitated. The glass was dry. There'd been no rain, no condensation, no reason for a fresh handprint to be there. Then, a second car alarm went off. This time from a black SUV parked diagonally opposite the sedan. The same pattern, shrieking siren, flashing lights, no one nearby. And once again, when the noise finally cut off, a handprint on the window. This one clearer, higher up, like it came from a standing child. Kenneth backed away slowly. His instincts told him to leave the lot entirely, but his legs wouldn't move. He stood frozen, heart pounding, every hair on his arm standing on end. The motion light clicked on. It wasn't pointing at him. It was aimed at bay number 5, an empty slot in the middle of a lot. Kenneth turned his head toward it just in time to see nothing, or at least no one visible. But the dust on the ground was disturbed. The gravel shifted ever so slightly, like someone had just stepped through. And then, in the stillness, came a metallic clink. Soft, deliberate. He turned toward the sound and saw something rolling across the pavement, a marble. White, smooth, and perfectly round. It circled once, twice, and stopped near his foot. Kenneth didn't pick it up. He stared at it, willing it to be a figment of his imagination. But then came the final blow. All of the car doors, every single vehicle in the lot, unlocked at once. A chorus of clicks in eerie unison. That was when he ran. He spent the rest of the night inside a 24-hour convenience store 2 blocks away, sipping bottled water with trembling hands. The cashier didn't ask questions. Kenneth must have looked like he'd seen a ghost. When he returned at sunrise, the lot was quiet again, but the marble was still there. So were the handprints. And for the first time, Kenneth truly believed he wasn't just imagining things. Something or someone was trying to be seen.
For a while, Kenneth thought maybe he was the problem. Maybe sleep deprivation was making him hallucinate. Maybe he was too stressed, too invested in making the lot work, and his mind was breaking under pressure. But then others started seeing it too. It began with a woman named Priya, who worked in a nearby insurance office. She parked in the lot twice a week and often exchanged pleasantries with Kenneth while retrieving her car. One evening, she returned, pale, visibly shaken. "I think someone was guiding me just now," she said. "A woman, long hair, white dress. She stood near the middle and waved, as if telling me where to park." Kenneth felt the blood drain from his face. He asked cautiously, "Was anyone else around?" Priya shook her head. "No, but she looked so real. I thought maybe she was helping you. I even smiled at her, but she didn't smile back." A few days later, a young delivery rider named Hafiz rolled in on his scooter. He parked, turned off his engine, then quickly turned it back on and sped away. 15 minutes later, he returned and parked again, but this time came straight to Kenneth. "There's a boy standing in Bay 4, he said, dead serious. "I saw him. Looked like he was lost, wearing old-fashioned clothes. I asked if he was okay, and he just stared." Kenneth followed him to Bay 4. It was empty. No footprints, no toys, no sign of a child. But Hafiz wasn't making it up. He looked like he'd seen something that made no sense to him, and that terrified him more than anything. Even Mr. Lim, Kenneth's father, began to notice. "You've been keeping this to yourself," he said one morning, standing by his car, arms crossed. "But I know something's not right." Kenneth didn't answer. Mr. Lim sighed. "Last night I saw lights flashing here while I was driving past, like warning signals, but no cars." He paused, then added more quietly, "Your mother used to say some places remember pain." The turning point came when a customer reported a minor accident inside the lot. 2 cars had bumped lightly while reversing, despite having plenty of space. Both drivers claimed they had followed hand signals from someone behind them. Kenneth checked the CCTV. The feed was mostly dark, cheap cameras didn't handle low light well, but one frame stood out. A blur. Pale. Thin. Just behind the bumper of one of the cars, for a fraction of a second. It wasn't dust. It wasn't a reflection. It was a figure. That night, Kenneth sat alone in the folding chair in the middle of the lot. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just watched the far corner. And finally, he whispered, "I see you."
It was just past 2 a.m. when Kenneth heard the sound of laughter. Not the kind that echoed from drunken passers-by or rowdy neighbors. This was softer, childlike, brief, like someone giggling into their hands and then vanishing. He sat up on the cot, holding his breath. Silence. He waited. Nothing. Then the motion sensor light flicked on. This time, it didn't blink. It held steady. Kenneth stepped out from under the canopy, flashlight in hand, and walked slowly toward the center of the lot. The air felt strange, cooler than usual. Still, that's when he saw them. A woman standing perfectly still near Bay 5. Her dress was white, delicate, old-fashioned. Her hair long, parted neatly down both sides. Her hands were at her sides, one clutching a small cloth bag. Next to her, holding her other hand, was a boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old, pale, dressed in what looked like a school uniform from decades ago. They weren't blurry. They weren't ghostly. They were clear, as real as anyone Kenneth had ever seen. But they weren't moving, and they weren't blinking. Kenneth's instinct told him to run, but something held him in place. A gravity, a feeling that they had been waiting for him to see them, not to scare him, but to be seen. The boy tilted his head. Then he pointed at Kenneth. The woman finally looked up, her eyes filled with something between sadness and urgency. And she spoke. "Why did you tell them to hurt my mummy?" Kenneth's mouth drew dry. He didn't understand. What was the boy talking about? Who hurt her? When? The woman stepped forward. Her feet made no sound. The gravel didn't shift. Kenneth stumbled back instinctively, but she stopped. From the small cloth bag, she pulled out a photograph, faded, torn at the corner. She held it toward him, and even in the dim light, Kenneth could make out the image. A family of 3, The woman, the boy, and a man. Tall, in uniform, stern. Kenneth had never seen the photo before. The woman lowered the picture. Her lips moved, but this time no sound came out. The boy looked up at her, confused, then back at Kenneth. The motion light blinked, and in that blink, they were gone. Kenneth stood alone in the dark, heart thudding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He didn't sleep that night, didn't even sit back down. Instead, he stood in the middle of the lot, staring at Bay 5 until the sun came up. When he finally returned to the folding chair, something was waiting for him. The photograph, right there on the seat. Same torn corner, same family. Only now Kenneth could see something he hadn't before. Behind the family, faint in the background, was the very same lot back when it was still a house. And suddenly, everything changed. Because now he knew this wasn't just haunting, it was unfinished business.
Kenneth didn't know where else to go. He needed answers, real ones, not theories about faulty lights or sleep deprivation. So he went to Mr. Tan, an elderly man who sold lottery tickets outside a nearby hawker center. The locals said he'd lived in the neighborhood for decades and knew all the old stories. Kenneth waited until the lunch crowd died down, then approached. "Uncle," he said, "can I ask you something? About the old house that used to be behind the shops." Mr. Tan's eyes narrowed, the corners of his mouth tightening ever so slightly. "You mean that cursed lot?" he said flatly. I nodded. Mr. Tan took a long sip from his kopi before speaking again. "I've seen many places torn down, but that one, no one wanted to touch it for years." According to Mr. Tan, the lot had once been the home of a retired Army officer and his family, a wife and young son. The officer had a strict reputation, barely spoke, rarely smiled. But no one ever suspected anything was wrong, until one night they heard screaming. Neighbors found the boy outside, crying. His hands were covered in blood. When they entered the house, they found the mother. She had been stabbed multiple times. The boy kept repeating one phrase, "Daddy told me to help." The father was never seen again. Police claimed he must have fled the country, but rumors swirled. Some said he'd taken his own life somewhere nearby. Others whispered he never left, that his body was buried under the floorboards before the house was demolished. After that, Mr. Tan continued, the land changed hands many times. People tried to build shops there, a cafe, even a small daycare once. But they never lasted. Kenneth swallowed. "Did anyone ever bless the land?" Mr. Tan nodded. "A few monks came, prayers were chanted, but nothing held. Because sometimes it's not just about blessing the land." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Sometimes it's about someone not wanting to be forgotten." Kenneth showed him the photo he had found on the folding chair. Mr. Tan stared at it for a long time, then gently tapped the man in uniform. "I think I knew him, or heard stories about him. Cold man, no empathy. Some said he came back from overseas, changed." Kenneth traced his finger over the boy's face. "I saw them," he whispered. "They weren't angry, not at first, but the boy, he said I told them to hurt his mummy." Mr. Tan leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "He probably thinks you're like the others who ignored what happened, that the world moved on, that no one cared." There was a long pause. Then Mr. Tan looked Kenneth straight in the eyes. "If you want peace, for them and for yourself,
Don't light candles. Don't call priests. Just remember them. That's all they ever wanted. That night, Kenneth didn't bring food or money or incense. He brought a tiny chair, a red plastic stool just the right height for a child. He placed it in the corner where the boy had stood, and for the first time since he started this whole thing, Kenneth said their names, because they deserved that much.
Kenneth didn't know if what he was doing made sense, but that night he returned to the lot with more than just the stool. He brought a small wooden tray, placed it carefully near Bay 5, and set 3 things on top: a cup of warm kopi, still steaming, a toy car, red, just like the one that had mysteriously appeared weeks earlier, and a folded note, handwritten in block letters. You are seen, you are remembered, you are safe here. He lit a single stick of incense, not to chase anything away, but to honor what had once been. Then he stepped back, stood by the entrance of the lot, and waited. He didn't expect anything magical to happen. No bright lights, no vanishing spirits. But for the first time in weeks, the lot felt still. Not heavy, not cold, just still. The next morning, 3 cars were parked when he arrived. By the end of the week, the lot was at 80% capacity daily. Drivers came back. Word spread online. A food delivery company struck a deal to rent the space after 6 p.m. for their evening riders. One customer told Kenneth she liked the lot because it felt calm. Another said he always got the last spot, even when the place looked full. Like, it's being saved for me, he laughed. Kenneth didn't advertise the change. He didn't mention the tray, but every night he replaced the kopi. Sometimes black, sometimes with condensed milk. Once he added a buttered bun, just in case the boy was hungry. Mr. Lim, Kenneth's father, noticed the shift too. You did something, he said, sipping kopi one morning beside his parked car. Kenneth only smiled. Mr. Lim tapped the hood of his vehicle. Whatever it was, you should keep doing it. Kenneth nodded. It's not about business anymore. And it wasn't. He didn't see the woman again, nor the boy. But sometimes, especially on misty mornings, he'd find tiny footprints in the gravel near the stool, always facing the tray, never walking away. He left them undisturbed. One night, while closing up, he spotted something resting on the stool. It wasn't the tray, or the toys. It was something new. A folded drawing. He opened it slowly. Crayon lines, shaky but clear. A stick figure family, mother, father, child, holding hands under the sun. In the bottom right corner, a simple word was scrawled: thank you. Kenneth didn't cry. Not then, but when he got home that night, he placed the drawing on his desk, stared at it for a long time, and whispered, "You're welcome." Because in a city that forgets fast, someone had finally been remembered. And sometimes, that's all it takes to make peace.
Years passed. The parking lot continued to operate quietly, steadily. Kenneth never expanded, never franchised. He didn't want to. The place had become more than a business. It was a space of memory, of healing. Regulars came and went. Some stayed loyal for years, others only once. But all of them, without knowing why, said the same thing: this lot feels kind. Kenneth never explained. He just smiled and nodded. Then came the letter. The landowner had sold the block. The lot would be cleared for redevelopment. A small shopping plaza was in the works. Kenneth had 2 months to vacate. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sad. Just grateful. He took his time shutting things down. No loud announcements, no fire sale. He simply stopped taking new customers, reduced hours, and cleaned up the space. On the final night, he arrived with one last offering: a fresh cup of coffee, the red toy car, the drawing the boy had left, and a handwritten card. "Thank you for sharing this space with me. I will remember you. Please rest now." He placed it gently on the stool, along with a small LED candle. Then he locked the gate for the last time. A week later, demolition began. Kenneth didn't return to watch. He thought it was better that way. But 2 years later, on a cloudy afternoon, he found himself passing by the new plaza. It was bustling: modern cafes, bubble tea chains, rooftop garden. Nothing remained of the old lot. Or so he thought, until a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, broke away from her parents and walked straight up to him. She tugged on his sleeve and smiled. "Uncle, I saw a pretty lady with a boy. They were waving at you." Kenneth froze. "What did they look like?" he asked, voice low. The girl shrugged. "They were nice. The boy had a red car in his hand." She skipped back to her parents, leaving Kenneth standing there, heart full, eyes misty. He didn't turn around, didn't look for them. He just stood quietly for a moment, then whispered, "I saw you too." We live in cities that change faster than memories can keep up. Buildings go up, roads get repaved, stories get buried, along with the people who once lived them. But every place has a past, and sometimes that past doesn't want to be erased. Kenneth's story isn't just about a haunted parking lot. It's about what happens when trauma is ignored and grief is silenced. The boy and his mother didn't want revenge. They wanted to be remembered, to not be discarded like the structure that once stood there. In Singapore, a city that values efficiency, progress, and reinvention, this story reminds us of what's often lost in that rush: human stories. And from an American perspective, the themes are universally resonant. The silence of post-war families, the weight of unspoken tragedies, the healing power of acknowledgement. The most powerful part? Kenneth doesn't defeat the ghosts. He sees them, honors them, and by doing so, sets both them and himself free. Because sometimes peace doesn't come from exorcism. It comes from memory. If this story gave you chills or made you think, don't scroll just yet. Hit like, drop a comment about the most haunted place in your city, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story, it's even darker. We want to hear from you. Do you believe some places remember what happened there? Have you ever seen something you couldn't explain? Would you have stayed in that parking lot? Let us know in the comments below.